He said he didn't understand Neil Adams' work until he looked at Kevin Nolan. Kevin Nolan told me that to simplify his style, he looked at the simple guys, like who? Like Roy Crane, for instance. Who was Roy Crane looking at? Milton Caniff.
Okay.
Now, maybe if Roy Crane were alive today, he'd tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, and it was a parallel evolution. Like, for instance, Joe Kubert and Steve Ditko at one point in their careers looked very much alike. Why? Because they were both looking at Mort Meskin. Who was looking at Mort Meskin? Jack Kirby.
I love Mort Meskin.
Enough. Yeah. But Mort Meskin, I would suspect. See, in the 1940s, every comic book guy was looking at Milton Caniff. I mean, everybody was. Alex Raymond was, Carmen Infantino was, Lee Elias. Plenty of people I never heard of.
So he set a standard?
Yeah, those were the gods.
Okay.
To be a comic strip artist meant you had made it. To be a comic book artist meant you were in the ghetto. They all wanted to get into. Yeah, they all wanted to get into comic strips. At one point, Milton Caniff, when he was doing Terry and the Pirates, was making the equivalent of $1 million a year doing a comic strip.
Crazy.
Little Abner, Al Cap, became a very rich man because he wrestled away the ownership from King Feature Syndicate. Okay. Now, I don't know who Harold Gray was looking at because that was comic strips, and certainly you look at Crazy Cat and the like, I don't think those guys were influenced by Caniff or Raymond or Foster, but I'm talking comic book people derived from there.
Okay.
So that Bern Hogarth was looking at Raymond and certainly Foster because he took over Flash Gordon. Joe Kubert was looking at Foster for sure.
Okay.
Right? Frank Frazetta was looking at Foster for sure. Now Frazetta and Williamson was definitely looking at Raymond. They all also looked at the illustrators and J.C. Cole and Alan St. John, who did the
Before we get into the real old guys like these guys we looked at the bookstore today, let's establish who are the Trinity.
Jack Kirby's early work he looked at and was influenced by Alex Raymond. Okay. So now, how many people can you name who were influenced by Jack Kirby since then, including Eric Larson? Right.
It goes on.
Right, including if you say Bill Sienkiewicz is influenced by Neil Adams, Neil Adams is influenced by Joe Kubert, who's influenced by Hal Foster. If you say pick a name,
that's the lineage.
Right. Pick a name. I don't know. Who? Arthur Adams.
How about Gil Kane?
Gil Kane was most definitely looking at. Well, Gil Kane looked at Lou Fine. Lou Fine was his guy.
I love Lou Fine.
Lou Fine came from Will Eisner and Alex Raymond via Milton Caniff. This is 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. Right?
Yes.
I mean, and it's like Gray Mara. You look at Gray Mara and you say, well, Gray Mara doesn't look like any of those guys. Well, I would bet you there's a Hal Foster influence in the proportion of his figures. And if you look at the earliest work, you can start seeing a black and white kind of a juxtaposition, which was more known by Hal Foster than Raymond. Raymond didn't develop that until the 50s, right? When Raymond got his more graphic, modern style. Which is why I've always contended that Alex Raymond is the greatest artist of the three, in that Caniff settled. He derived from Noel Sickles, and then he settled. Hal Foster came from the pulp guys, and he matured and settled.
Yes.
And Alex Raymond, there are periods of Alex Raymond's career where you can see him imitating Milton Caniff, absolutely imitating Milton Caniff, imitating Hal Foster. And then by the 50s, he was influenced by the more graphic illustrators and a modern feeling to the work, where he had distilled it down to illustrative, but a graphic illustrative, where somebody like Foster is not graphic as much. I mean, God knows there's brilliant black and white there.
Can you define graphic?
Graphic, by definition, I think means obvious, noticeable, bold. So that if you got...
like something
like Craig Russell is not graphic. Craig Russell is very open and linear and lets the color do the work. Gil Kane, when he pencils his own work, there isn't a graphic punch. There's not a big black, there's the other thing. But if you get somebody Nolan, for sure, and in a subtler, more understated way, Wally Wood, as derived from Milton Caniff, And even you get somebody like John Prentice. John Prentice obviously came from Alex Raymond. Now, Leonard Starr, who did the on-stage comic strip for 30 years, told me that he was trying to combine the drawing skills of Alex Raymond with the graphics of Milton Caniff. Okay?
Nice.
So, and Dick Giordano. Dick Giordano comes from Milton Caniff, not Jack Kirby. And even when you get Stan Drake, again, the comic strip guy, he came from the 40s illustrators, trying to figure out how they did their work. By the way, there's an anecdote where he was playing golf. Stan was playing golf with Alex Raymond, his idol. and Raymond turned to him and said, "Stan, how do you draw those pretty girls? I wish you'd show me." You know, I mean, you know, die and go to heaven right at that moment.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure you couldn't possibly draw a comic book figure with blacks on it without owing something to Milton Caniff. Except, of course, Milton Caniff came from Noel Sickles, who came from the pulps, I think.
Right.
No. And like I said, I mean, I don't know. There are guys like Alex Maleev, whatever his name is.
Maleev.
I'm not exactly sure where he comes from because I'm not that knowledgeable about his work. But if you get somebody like Ryan Sook, who's wonderful, or Adam Hughes, Ryan Sook and Adam Hughes are both definitely influenced by Kevin Nolan, who was influenced by Roy Crane, who's influenced by Milton Caniff. So it just keeps going back. Now, you know, you can say, how do you not... You can say anybody comes from this just because they're drawing a line, right? But when little kids draw a picture in class, it's always linear. You know, it's never tonal, it's never smudgy, it's always an outline. Well, where does that come from? Because outlines were invented. Outlines don't exist, right? When somebody draws a person and they draw a circle and stick two eyes and a smiley in it, we know that's a person because it's a distillation, but it never existed until somebody invented it. So I think the reason that kids draw linearly is because of comic books and comic strips. Because they're not looking at paintings in museums or necessarily illustrations, but they buy a comic book or a cartoon or a greeting card, and it's always a line drawn.